Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Silverman, co-founder of CommerceNext. I'm coming to you today from Seattle, Washington. For those of you not familiar with CommerceNext, we're a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and DTC brands. On behalf of my co-founders, Veronica Sansev and Alan Dick, I'd like to welcome you to our regular webinar. Today is TikTok, Instagram, and other social commerce opportunities in 2022. We're seeing the major social platforms prioritize social commerce as an investment, including yesterday's news that TikTok's building a fulfillment centers in the US. And we believe this is a really important topic to cover with our community. As always, we'll be taking your questions, so feel free to load them up during the presentation. But thank you all for tuning in or making the time to listen to our replay. So want to start with a few important thank yous. First and foremost, I want to thank today's speakers who are giving their time and their insights to share on this topic. Katie Reed, who's VP Performance Marketing at Society6 and Saatchi Art. Vivek Kumar, CEO of Teepublic. Carter Jensen, Senior Manager of Global E-commerce at General Mills. And Saskia Vandeven, who's SVP Global Partnerships at Productsup. We recognize how busy our speakers are and how grateful we are for them taking the time to share their insights with all of you. We will be sending them a nice thank you gift, compliments of gift now. I want to especially thank Productsup for supporting today's webinar and being our sponsor. We couldn't do these without and bring all these insights to our audience without support of our sponsors. And it's been a pleasure working with Saskia and the Productsup team, and I really appreciate them supporting getting our community better informed about this topic. A couple things that are coming up. This week, we're doing something a little different for our audience. So we are looking to grow our social presence, and maybe we'll be selling some things and doing social commerce. But the first 5 people to follow CommerceNext on Instagram will get a free gift via Gift Now. So you can find us on Instagram at CommerceNext. So feel free to go follow us and win a nice gift. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, October 26th, in a couple of weeks, called Treat Any Day Like Black Friday, Unwrap Your New Normal. We'll be sharing a unique point of view of how you do not have to be at the mercy of code freezes during the holiday season, with speakers from Puma, Logitech, Commerce Tools, and Deloitte Digital, and moderated by my co-founder, Veronica Sansev. And our newest episode of Conversations with CommerceNext is out. It's an interview with FTD CEO Charlie Cole. It is 40 minutes packed on great lessons on leadership, digital transformation, and career acceleration. You can check it out on commercenext.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have some brand new research. We just have a ton of content for our community. This is on holiday 2023, from digital sales cheers to consumer spending fear. You can download this report in the handouts. I'll show you where those are in a moment. It's based on a survey of 100 retailers. If you took the survey, thank you very much. Has insights on expectations for sales, promotions, profits, marketing tactics, and more. Also, we are always looking to expand our community, and we have a refer a friend program. You can win prizes like a Theragun or a Apple AirTag. So just look in the chat on how to do that and help us spread the word if you are enjoying the information that you're getting from us. And as always, I want to remind you to go to YouTube, the CommerceNext channel. We have all of our past webinars, summit sessions. There's literally hundreds of sessions and different content and interviews for you to enjoy on practically every topic you can think of. So just a couple housekeeping notes. Don't worry about missing anything. We're recording the webinar. We'll make it available tomorrow. And I want to show you where a couple things are on your screen. So if you look on the upper right, that is the main panel for all the interactivity. You can see there's chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. Chat's where you can interact with your fellow attendees. You can give speakers high fives and make comments or observations about what you're learning so far. If you have a question, which is different than just making a comment, please use the Q&A. One of the nice things about the Q&A is it has a upvoting. So you'll see in the Q&A, there's different questions. And if you think one's interesting from someone else, you can upvote it, and that'll help prioritize it for us. Handouts. The presentation that Saskia is going to be delivering in a moment, the research I mentioned, some other handouts are there. You can download all of those. And then if you're listening on the replay, you can get all of that data, including the polling question responses on the bottom right there. So moving on our agenda for today's webinar. So in a moment, we're going to have Saskia give an overview of the current state of social commerce. Then we'll do a couple audience poll questions, and then we'll have a panel discussion on social commerce with General Mills, Teepublic, Society6, and we'll take your audience questions, which again, please, anything you think of while Saskia is giving her presentation, jot those down, put them in as a question. We want to cover as many as we can. We are really excited to have Saskia join our virtual stage. She is Productup's SVP of Partners. She works closely with all of the major social platforms that we'll be talking about today. She brings a point of view based on regularly observing, talking to, learning about their involvement in social commerce. So Saskia, thanks for joining our virtual stage. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you everyone for being here. And today we will keep it short because obviously we want to keep enough time for all the interactive panel conversations and Q&A. But I'm very pleased to be here. And as Scott said, I'm Saskia van der Ven, and I run the Global Partner Organization at Productsup. So first, a little bit about Productsup. In short, we are a platform that enables brands and manufacturers, retailers, and hyperscalers to take product information and optimize it for interacting with consumer channels. And we do that by allowing business users to get data, so the commerce people, from all different sources where product information is held. We combine that into one environment where it can be mapped and optimized for the requirements of the consumer channels that you wish to engage with. We manage literally hundreds of companies' data that way, and we work very closely with digital agencies, system integration firms, and technology companies to facilitate a more efficient and holistic approach to getting product information out to your consumers. And in that way, we align really closely with, indeed, like Scott said, social media companies, marketplaces, and retailers, both as users as well as receivers and senders of product information, of course. So one thing that we have learned in the past 13 years is that having and building a holistic strategy, and this is, by the way, something that we learned over time as well, building a holistic strategy and architecture and a process around getting your product to the consumer is key. But it's also a very large challenge. Many of today's businesses we see still have quite a siloed approach to the execution of commerce activities. The website, dynamic advertising, marketplaces, they're usually handled in different parts of the organization, and sometimes they don't talk to each other very well. So today we are here to specifically hone in on social commerce, which is a topic that is very near and dear to our hearts at Productsup. What trends do we see? What is it? And who is doing what? So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. I'll be covering a couple of the topics that you see on the slide. So what's happening today in 2022? What are some of the key insights that we see and challenges that people are facing in this area? And what can you do next? What should you be doing? So if you talk about social commerce, one of the things that really we should be starting out with is social media, because social media is the foundation of everything, understanding around social commerce. And if you think about social media, we currently have about 4.7 billion social media users around the world, and that was measured in July 2022. That equates to about 59% of the total global population. That is huge. Social media numbers have continued to grow over the last 12 months too, with 227 million new users joining social media since this time last year. So what does that mean if you look at the big social media platforms and the growth that they see in monthly active users? So if we look at the graph that I'm showing here, you can see that every big platform is still showing growth in their monthly active users, and that's what they really focus on looking at. But that the growth from some of the largest players is kind of declining a little bit, being more stabilized. They're still growing, but not as fast as, for example, video native apps like TikTok. So there's definitely something happening and something huge happening in social media. So social media, I said, is growing, especially when looking at video first platforms. We know that social media is a great way to create user engagement, engage with larger groups of consumers in a more meaningful and interactive way. Dynamic advertising, influencer collaborations, and influencer marketing have been really proven to be new ways to create consumer interaction. So what does that mean? What is social commerce then? Well, social commerce represents that intersection of e-commerce and social media where the two meet, where we can enable consumers to research, discover, review, and also purchase all of the products in one platform. And that's become a key piece in omnichannel selling. And omnichannel is obviously not a term that's necessarily new. That's been going on for quite a few years, even decades. That trend of consumers using a multitude of interactions with brands and retailers before they decide to purchase where they feel most comfortable and engaged to purchase. So we've talked about omnichannel for probably decades, but social commerce is really changing that environment. So let's have a look at a few ways that the shopping experience on social media is really different from traditional e-commerce. I think one of the first major shifts that we've seen, and that has happened quite a while ago already, is a shift from static images to more engaging creatives. And the development there makes sense because social media is a place where consumers find inspiration for new products rather than searching for products they already know and want to buy via like search engines like Google. But really, when discovering, exploring, finding that inspiration, experience that they have needs to be different, more interactive and more attractive instead of just functional. And that means that product images and videos are no longer just a piece of product data. They're really a key way that brands and retailers can capture the attention of their consumers. And if we look further on how the buying journey has evolved, one of the biggest developments that we already talked about a little bit earlier or touched upon is native checkout. Native checkout allows users to check out within the social app that they're using. And that replaces, I think it's the next development of what is known as click out, where a user clicks on an ad and is then redirected through to a third-party website to complete their purchase. Native checkout is really still limited in its availability. Most platforms only offer that functionality in the US and Canada. But all platforms are expected to really expand on native checkout capabilities in the very near future. And Scott just mentioned actually that article about TikTok and opening their own distribution warehouses in the US. That would be really a clear indication that they are very serious about in-app shopping and handling orders and returns, and then maybe even becoming a competition for the likes of Amazon. I think why this particular development is so important that it really closes the loop on social commerce. When you look at native checkout and the entire end-to-end purchase process, it's all happening within a social app. And that means that social platforms are now fully a part of the ecosystem, the e-commerce ecosystem, and that the influence that they have on that ecosystem is even more powerful than ever before. So if we look at social media companies like Meta, and we do quite a lot of that, and we talk to them a lot about that too, they are betting heavily on the metaverse. There's a lot of development and focus on that. And it's easy to see how social commerce can potentially also be an incredibly important gateway for these companies to enter the metaverse. And many people think that the metaverse is in the future, but in fact, in some ways, it's already here. We heard earlier this year that Instagram would be supporting NFTs, and many platforms are offering immersive shopping experiences like virtual try-on. So we see that these social media platforms, like for example Snap, Meta, and Pinterest, are really investing heavily into augmented reality technology in order to bring that shopping experience that you could only really have in a shop before or in store before to people's homes. And I think we can expect that we will see more and more of these solutions as the metaverse concept continues to develop across the board. So we've covered some of the trends, but now what about the users, right? Because that's actually where we want to get our biggest gains. And in the next couple of slides, we'll look at some of the key insights and figures to understand the consumer behavior across the social platforms in the US and globally. So if we look at numbers around the numbers for social commerce, on the slide that you see here, we've provided a bit of an overview of what we think are the top 5 social media platforms that are currently offering social commerce capabilities. And you can see that Facebook by far is still the largest platform in terms of its numbers of global users and US users. They offer native checkout, and you can also see that many of the companies offer native checkout, but in a limited fashion. TikTok is the fastest growing app in terms of users, and all of the platforms offer dynamic ad and basic shopping capabilities. And when we talk about basic shopping capabilities, we're talking about that function when you're rolling over an ad or something, a video that you see, and you can see the product tags that you can click, or you can use search functionalities in app. For me, it was interesting to see also that Twitter is not on the list, and they were much later with coming to the table with things like advertising and being more dynamic and engaged around that platform. But I expect that we will see more from Twitter in the future in this space too. They cover a slightly different user group and audience and an experience that's different, but it could be very interesting for different types of brands to look into that as well. So what about the users in 2022? What do we see happening there? So we have about 97 million social commerce buyers in the US, and that is expected to continue to grow year over year. If we look at the consumers, 42% of consumers tell us that they prefer to check out directly on an app and not on a third-party website. And that is a big deal. We at Productsup sometimes see some hesitation with brands and retailers to adopt native checkout. And that can be driven by the wish and need to own the consumer's data, to own that part of the journey. However, there's a proven loss in conversion as soon as you prolong the buyer's journey to click out. And I even noticed that with myself. I will admit to having a bit of a shopping habit sometimes. And 9 out of 10 times when I do that kind of inspiration discovery on, for example, Instagram, I won't purchase in the end if I have to go to a third-party website. I get distracted. There's a hassle of creating accounts, and so that is definitely something that I notice. I notice as well. 98% of online shoppers in the US will make at least one purchase directly from a social network in 2022. That's huge, and I will show you on the next slide um, how that number has changed because that's quite impactful. More than half of social commerce users in the US are between 18 and 24 years old, so the whole Gen Z generation. So again, if you're looking at attracting new clients, new consumers, you need that continuity. That is definitely the audience that sits on social commerce. However, I always look at this not just that more than half is between 18 and 24, but then the other just under half is 24 and older, right? And if I look at my generation, and definitely not Gen Z, more and more people are purchasing on social commerce channels too. TikTok and Instagram have absolutely got the fastest growing amount of social commerce buyers. Now, I was mentioning a minute ago about a share of online consumers making at least one purchase directly from social networks. Look at the change from 21 to 22. That's why I wanted to hone into that, because that is a significant change year on year. And if you see 2021, I think it was 68%, and now it's 98%. And that's the type of growth that brands and retailers really cannot ignore. So we've seen how social commerce is posing a huge opportunity if you look at users and numbers of growth for many companies that want to sell their products to consumers. But there are also quite a few challenges to overcome if you want to be able to capitalize on that opportunity and effectively operate in this omni-channel consumer environment. First of all, there's a challenge for the social commerce companies themselves. Targeted advertising in combination with customer data protection obviously poses some big challenges for these companies. Then there's the complexity of a myriad of different commerce systems, local rules and regulations, and other things that make it complicated to roll this out. So there is a lot of investment and focus required to be able to make this successful. What are the challenges that retailers and brands face? I think for retailers and brands, the main challenge is how quickly the space is changing in terms of the capabilities and requirements. The fact that it's complex for social commerce companies does not stop them from rolling this out and focusing on it. So it means that we have to keep up with that, as well as the fact that our consumer expectations are changing and shifting constantly. And that becomes a very difficult task for businesses to keep up and make sure that we're targeting the right demographic on the right channel. So what does that look like? Well, we all know that brands, retailers, service providers, we all have one simple and common goal, and that's to deliver compelling offers in the form of products and their corresponding product data to buyers. But whilst we're doing that, we're continuing to face a maze of complex paths that has emerged between the suppliers and the buyers over the years. Since the rise of digitalization in commerce, like with channels like Google and Facebook and Amazon, what was once kind of simple, a buyer walked into a store, bought a product, there we are, has now become infinitely more complex. Today, consumers go online, offline, take a virtual or real world tour before actually finally purchasing, if they purchase at all. And because companies find it quite challenging to navigate these journeys, many businesses are wasting time and burning resources to try to find the right path through the maze to the consumer touchpoints. So one of the questions I have to everybody here is, can you navigate these channels? And here we are just talking about the top 5 social commerce platforms. not even about all the rest of the potential consumer channels that you can find out there. And my guess is that it is a challenge for every business out there. So when we talk about the complexity of social selling, this is driven on the external side by channel proliferation, a lot of competition, regulations, and then also the speed of development, new social commerce capabilities, new channels, new regions. Which ones do you adopt and which ones do you leave or leave for now? In turn, that leads internally to challenges around availability of the right data in the right structure, the visibility on which channels should be used, and increasing pressure on the cost of consumer acquisition that we talked about when we first started this webinar. Having to manually repeat the same tasks again and again for different channels, different formats, new products, new or different regions. And then the IT complexity of data and product information requirements that comes with that increases the reliance on IT, which really doesn't help agility, which is one of the key things that we need to have. So not being able to manage that type of environment correctly can really lead obviously to increased risk for your brand. If you think about small errors in data, like a wrong sizing on a pair of jeans, at best it can earn you a few unhappy customers that keep your support staff busy. But more often, those mistakes might lead their way onto social media or critical review posts, which doesn't necessarily help the brand's reputation. So, being able to address that effectively will improve competitiveness and brand reputation, compliance, and ultimately help future success. So we did a bit of research into this, and luckily we have found that there is a lot of awareness about this problem. So 97% of e-commerce leaders that we interviewed expressed concern about their consistency of product information. And they gave the insight that getting the strategy and execution around product information and the data supply chain is a problem. By the way, like Scott said, the report that we did is also downloadable for you as part of the resources that we have in the webinar. So, in conclusion, if we look at this whole story, what we like to call the supply chain of product and data information from source to channel, we call it product data value chains, are becoming increasingly complex. And having a holistic strategy and architecture across your people, your process, and your data is key. Making sure that your brand experience is consistent and that checking out is easy and straightforward. Knowing when to adopt new functionality and understanding the user-based audiences of channels available, and then making smart choices, which is, by the way, easier said than done. So hopefully in our next section, we can talk a little bit and give some insight with all the esteemed panel members here into how some of us are doing that and how do we work with these challenges and opportunities. Scott, back to you.
Thank you, Saskia. Great overview. Again, you can download Saskia's presentation in the handouts. We are going to hear a little bit from our audience about how you're thinking about these. So we're going to do a few poll questions, and you'll see again in the upper right where the polls are, and you can look at the polls that are open or closed. And we'll also read out what we're seeing from them. So why don't we jump into the first question? So what percent of online shopping do you think will be social commerce 5 years from now? So more than 50%, 25 to 50%, 15 to 25%, 5 to 15%, or less than 5%. This is looking ahead 5 years from now. Almost 2/5 of you, 39%, expected to be 25 to 50%. That's a lot. on social commerce. So the number 2 is more than 50%. So there's a lot of enthusiasm and expectation of social commerce being a big deal. So, all right, let's go to the next question. So now that we've just established everyone has big hopes for this, which social platform should retailers and brands invest in the most now for social commerce? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, or something else? Feel free to, if it's something else, to put it in the chat in there. Not quite, it might, and something else could be something that hasn't been invented yet. So let's see what everyone's thinking there. Wow, 52% believe that you should be investing the most in TikTok for social commerce, followed by Instagram at 30% and Facebook at 12%. Interestingly, only 4% for Pinterest. So it'll be interesting if we have any conversation in the panel discussion on what's going on with Pinterest and why there's not a lot of expectation for more there in terms of social commerce. So last question, and this is a preview for next week's webinar, which is treat any day like Black Friday. So this question will make a lot of sense related to that. When do you go into code freeze for the holidays? Is it before October 15th? Is it between October 15th and the end of October, the 31st? The first 2 weeks of November, the 1st through the 15th, or never? You don't have a holiday code freeze. We don't have a holiday code freeze. That was 35%. November 1st through the 15th was number 2 at 32%. We got a little bit of information on how everyone's thinking. Why don't we bring up our panel and get started with that conversation? Hello, panel. How's everyone doing? Thank you for joining us again. Well, so why don't we start with some introductions? If you could introduce yourself, your role, your company, and then just tell us what you're currently doing or have tried in terms of social commerce. So why don't we start with Carter over at General Mills?
Great. Thanks, Scott, for having me. Excuse me. My name is Carter Jensen. I lead our global e-com team, specifically in new and emerging channels. So social commerce comes square into my team's purview. And right now what we are doing is we're looking over kind of our global collection of over 100 brands, figuring out how do we use social and the tools that social commerce brings to the table to provide the shortest, most friction-free path to purchase for the goods that we produce, and have done some really interesting things in the last 6 months to make that come to life. So I'm excited to be here and excited to speak with the other members of the panel about this.
All right. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me as well, Scott. Katie Reed. I'm Vice President of Performance Marketing for Society6 and Saatchi Art. I lead all paid media acquisition and retention marketing efforts. A little bit about the brands that I work on. Society6 is a global e-commerce marketplace. We partner with about 500,000 artists worldwide who upload their designs to our platform. Those designs can be paired on 90 or more products across wall art, home decor, apparel, and more. We're a made-to-order business model. And then Saatchi Art is the world's largest online art gallery where you can buy original artwork from top artists worldwide. So that'll kind of help contextualize my responses as part of this conversation. So, you know, social commerce is immensely important to both brands that I work on. You know, for Society6, for example, we have a massive catalog, over 300 million SKUs. So personalization is absolutely critical. We need to be sure that we're sending the right product and design recommendation to the right person at the right time. So we spend a lot in dynamic product ads and catalog ads as a result, where we really rely on platform level algorithms to do some of the decisioning for us, right? So with retargeting, you can base that off of site behavior. For prospecting, you're relying on a variety of intent signals. So that's a core part of our approach to social commerce. We also, of course, are leaning in heavily to influencer and content creator networks and building those out. We know that's the type of content that consumers are engaging with. And are really driving sales, frankly, a lot more than more of the brand-centric produced content of the past. So that's the direction that we're really headed into now and throughout 2023.
Great. And Vivek.
Hey everyone, thanks Scott for having me here as well. I'm CEO of Teepublic. Similar to Society6, Teepublic is a online marketplace, one of the world's largest marketplace for independent artists and content creators to sell their art on a variety of products across different categories like apparel and home goods. We have millions and millions of designs on our website that customers can discover and shop for. And in terms of social commerce, outside of the social ads, where we are leaning into is into the podcasters and more of that influencer community and leveraging their social networks and having them use us as a commerce partner for merchandise. So that's the main focus right now.
Saskia, I want to turn to you and get your reaction on the polling question about where retailers should be investing. It was interesting. The high percent for TikTok. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was higher than I thought it would be. With Instagram, I believe in the number 2 spot. But you're talking to these companies all the time. I know you can't share all the secrets that they give you, even though we're going to try to ask you to share those anyway. But, maybe I'll put it this way: is our audience correct in where they should be placing their bets, and why so little interest in Pinterest?
Yeah, so you're asking 3 questions actually. Are they correct in and where should they be placing their bets? Well, one of the things that we still see happening today is that most brands and retailers place their bets on Facebook and Instagram. I think that's in line with what I've seen in all the stats from other companies too. So that seems to be what's happening today. That's working. It's working well. We do see an enormous increased growth in TikTok ourselves too. Do I think that retailers should be placing their bets on TikTok? My answer would be it depends, because it depends on the user base that you're trying to engage with and the typical audience that you're trying to draw into your organization where you're expecting your purchases from. I think there is something about who are you selling to today, and are you trying to convert, and what are you trying to do to engage the generations that are coming as well. So if you're looking at bringing in a younger audience, yes, TikTok is where you should be placing your bets. If you're looking at what do I need today and where am I most likely to create my conversion now, it's probably in the well-versed channels around Facebook and Instagram. Now, talking about Pinterest, it is interesting that nobody thinks that Pinterest is that progressive or likely to become a big deal in social commerce. Obviously, they've just acquired the Yes, and the Yes is going to be their way to push into social commerce. They're just at the start of their journey. That acquisition hasn't happened that long ago. So I think it's a little early to say how successful will they be in this, but it does give an indication on how serious they are about this. Now, one of the things that I'd also say is what we are seeing today is that the most engagement and the most conversion you see is around lifestyle, beauty, food, in these social commerce environments. And so that would give me an indication that actually Pinterest could be very interesting for social commerce if they get it right, because they have a particularly good platform for interacting around lifestyle, design, food, and fashion, beauty. So I would say watch that space.
And for the rest of the panel, I mean, Carter, I'll start with you. In the prep call, and you mentioned it in your opening that this is like, social commerce is right in your wheelhouse. So you're watching this very closely. What do you think in terms of the major platforms and where you think everyone should be investing right now?
Yeah, totally. And Saskia, I love how you cut that based on kind of audience type and demographic. I think we look at that, and then we look at another dimension as well, at kind of content types, right? So towards the end, Saskia, you mentioned, kind of this lifestyle, beauty, food is really taking off. And for any TikTok users out there, I think we all saw the viral recipe content of the sushi with the ice cube in the middle. And what we found, and there's been plenty of research and reporting that's been done on this, is that recipe content goes the most viral on TikTok. It's because of the algorithm, it's because of the shareable nature, it's because of the engagement for a variety of reasons that a lot of us don't even know, right? And so when we look across our brands, we said, well, let's take Pillsbury and Betty Crocker and Golden Up Flour and some of the kind of recipe focused baking type brands, and let's push really hard into TikTok. And maybe move some dollars away from Instagram and Facebook, because we knew that's where the content would perform the best. And partnering with then TikTok to figure out what's the shortest path to purchase from that incredible recipe content to actually adding that to a cart at a local retailer has been really kind of what we have been focusing on, especially around kind of the emerging platform of TikTok.
And so Vivek and Katie, you kind of have to like represent the interest of everyone that's not selling food. But yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of where this is shaking out, what our audience is thinking? Is it too early to invest in TikTok right now for something like this, or the game is really for outside of food, for things like apparel and home goods, and is it more in Instagram and Facebook?
I mean, I can speak first. Yeah, I mean, I think there's opportunity across all platforms, and like Saskia said, it's really a matter of like where your audience is. I would say for Society6, we're really a brand for all consumers, from Gen Z to millennial to Gen X and so on. So it makes sense for us to invest in TikTok to reach that Gen Z, and Instagram for more millennial and that older, on Facebook. We have such a wide assortment of products and, different personas that gravitate to certain products. Like our apparel audience is typically a little younger than like our wall art audience, so to speak. So, there's really opportunity across the board, which is exciting.
Yeah, and similar for us, like we are really thinking about the content types. We have millions of designs, and how do you think about the needs of the customer? Are they buying more trend-driven designs? Are they going after the 80s and 90s nostalgia? And each platform has its strengths, right? Where we can really be targeted in terms of which types of influencers we want to go after, who are, again, not just for advertising, but then saying, hey, this is a design that I created. They have a good following, and then go use Teepublic for your commerce. Now, it's not fully native yet. That's based on what Saskia was saying, is still part of that journey of making it more seamless. But I think a lot of the social platforms, including TikTok, are really investing heavily in commerce, and their announcement today that we were talking about in our caller there is clear indication to that. So I don't think I think it's a critical channel, TikTok, to continue to focus on and make sure that we ride the growth in that platform.
So one of the things Saskia covered in her opening was the existence of native checkout versus or I forget what you called it, the
click out.
What?
Click out
versus checkout. And in the prep call, we had a pretty interesting conversation around that. And I know at least like Katie and Vivek, you're not using native checkout, and I'd be interested to hear your point of view on why, and what you're thinking about there. And I'm going to try to like incorporate. There was a question that came in, and maybe Saskia can, after Katie and Vivek weigh in on why they're not using native checkout. For Saskia, just like what do you, if you are using native checkout, what data are you getting or not from the customer? But I don't, Vivek, you want to start with why you're not using native checkout for the time being?
Yeah, there are two main reasons. I think the first one is as a scale, the breadth and depth of content that we have on our e-commerce website. Again, you're talking about millions of designs, and when you start to do all the permutations and combinations with the product sizes, colors, you're talking in a scale of billions of SKUs that are in our product feed. So for a commerce platform to provide that level of experience dealing with billions of SKUs with a native checkout, giving the same experience of discoverability, that's something that I think is still a gap. And on the fulfillment and logistics side, we are again print on demand company, which differs from a traditional e-commerce where you have a much longer time to fulfill. And I don't think a lot of the platforms have to catch up again in terms of how they work with a lot of the marketplaces that have a little bit of a longer lead time, because it's not the same model of a traditional e-commerce retailers. So those, I would say, are a couple of the main challenges that I see right now when it comes to native checkout or tighter integration.
Yeah, I mean, we have Shops Live, but they currently just link out to our website. I think there are pros and cons that have to be weighed, and those could be very well unique for each brand. I remember several years ago when I was at a different brand, we were more the first to market with a native checkout. We dedicated all these like tech and engineering resources. We launched, and like literally 2 weeks later, we were told it was being disabled because they had to work through some issues. So I feel a little burned by that. And I think that's happened several times. Saskia, you could speak a lot better to that. I'm optimistic we'll get there, and most everyone will eventually. You just have to figure out when the time is right for you. My business has a lot of the same challenges as Vivek's. We're made to order. How does fulfillment work when people want to return a product? Like, what is the level of involvement of our CX team? Like, will we own all of the customer data that we really want to build one-on-one long-term relationships with these customers? Obviously, there's a platform fee. How does that factor into, business economics? I would echo Vivek, the search capabilities are pretty generic. When you're a marketplace with hundreds of millions of SKUs, it's really not at the level and caliber that we need it to be. Again, I think all in due time, but that's kind of where we sit right now, as well as getting this on our tech and engineering priority list, right? Competing with everything else.
Yeah,
And,
I think
Carter, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, we have a unique challenge where, we are governed by fair and equitable laws usually, unless we have D2C. Some of our brands are D2C, but it's a very small percentage. And so we actually have to do click out to give the consumer the ability to choose the retailer that they would like to actually purchase the product from. Because of that extra click, we do our best to add a value to that landing location. So, if we are forced to use click out, checkout, Saskia, as you mentioned, that next landing location is mobily optimized. It's really fast. And the technology we've built actually will list all of the retailers based on IP address and show pricing of that product. And so the consumer can actually click into maybe more of a value add. But as people who are watching know, every click that you put into that cycle, you lose about 90% of your audience. So it's a mix of optimization on the click out and also ensuring that we're adding as much value as we can based on kind of the mandates that are put on top of a lot of our social commerce experiences.
And Saskia, anything else you want to share with our audience about native checkout? Is there trying to weigh the pros and cons? And I think they should all pay attention to what Vivek and Katie said, and being careful not to invest too much if the platforms decide to make a big shift or something.
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of the challenge that all of us face, right? When new technology comes afoot, new opportunities come. When do you get in? When do you get on the train? When do you decide to prioritize your finite resources and capabilities, your technologies, your development into adopting that? And I think the answer will be different for every different type of company, and we happen to have a wonderful selection here of companies with quite big complexities, right? Because like Katie and Vivek are saying, they're working with hundreds of millions of SKUs. Well, if you're looking at, for example, getting parity between your own website experience and the social platform application experience with hundreds of millions of SKUs, that is a very complicated situation to accomplish. So I can imagine that that is something that needs to be thought through very carefully on both sides of the fence, because it brings complications for both the social commerce companies as well as for you guys. So that's probably a conversation that needs to happen also with parties like us and different perhaps digital agencies and stuff. So how can we best do this, right? Because there's a lot of technology enablement that needs to go into that. And then secondly, looking at what Carter was saying around General Mills, there's obviously a whole bunch of D2C companies that don't have the opportunity to actually do native checkout because of fair and equitable reasons and things like that. And again, for that type of company, we also need to make sure that we optimize their purchase experience with their consumer. So even companies like us who sit in the middle need to think about all of these different audiences that we have and make sure that we give them the right recommendations on when to adopt and not to adopt. And that obviously requires a lot of conversation also with the social commerce guys. And then there was a question about data. So when you use native checkout, do you own the data? Or Katie also mentioned what part of the data do we own? And it's actually, I think it's an incredibly good question and an incredibly difficult one to answer as well. What I do know from conversations with different companies is that they all aim to get as much of that data to the brand, to the retailer, to whoever owns that consumer, right? Whoever is the one that is creating that native checkout experience for them. But it can be dependent on local data privacy rules, on local legal rules. I do know that in most cases, if you get the consent of the person who purchases, that their data be shared with the brand or retailer that they are purchasing from, even though it's in app, you should be covered. And that I know is definitely big on the radar of all social commerce platforms, that they need to make sure that the adverse effect on owning that data about your consumer is as minimal as possible, because every single company wants to create that intimate knowledge of their own purchasing audience. Does that make sense?
Yep. So we have 5 minutes left. I do want to make sure that we cover product feeds, because we heard, in the audience polling questions that there's an expectation for a lot more social commerce to be happening in the next 5 years. Everyone needs to be prepared for it. Saskia alluded to product feeds being important there. I know we talked a little bit on the prep call. Maybe I could start with you, Vivek, on how you tell us a little bit about how you handle product feeds. How much of is it internal organization? Is what kind of resources, both human and technical, do people in our audience need to think about, so they can have a clean data feed and be prepared for more social commerce?
Yeah, definitely. I think managing product feed with this level of complexity is definitely a challenge and a focus. it requires strong collaboration between marketing and technology. And like potentially, I've also seen specialized role on the marketing technology space. So I think that's a critical kind of internal alignment. But also we are actually using Productsup and having a partner that can scale the data across these different platforms is something that, again, based on your business and complexity in your data as well as catalog, something that could be where someone can gain leverage from. So that's kind of how we think about it. It's like there's strong internal collaboration between marketing, tech, and then using Productsup to scale across different platforms.
And Carter or Katie, anything you want to add, or should we move on to one more question?
I'll double down on the fact it's incredibly complex, especially with the amount of SKUs that everyone on this call is dealing with, right? And I think it just multiplies with new platforms and new capabilities. And so I'll just double down on what Vivek was able to highlight.
Yeah, I would just say, our feed is so large, it's too much for any platform to accommodate. So we have to be really strategic in what are the SKUs that we send over, right? A lot of that's based on what are the top SKUs in terms of traffic or revenue, for example, and then that can fuel the algorithms. We're also big into creating custom collections, right? So because we have so many SKUs, we can create unique content that's themed in different ways, whether it's seasonal, right? Holidays coming up. We have gift guides we want to promote. We don't want all of our SKUs feeding into those ads. We just want to, pick out the SKUs that are part of our gift guide collections, right? There's a lot of data mining that we also do to understand what are the products and the designs that customers on social platforms gravitate to, creating custom labels so that we're just pulling out those specific SKUs and creating content and campaigns around that.
All right, so I'm going to try to squeeze in just a little bit in the last minute. I think by anyone's definition, live stream shopping falls into social commerce. It seems like at the beginning of the year, when we were programming the CommerceNext event, there was a lot of interest in live stream shopping. It feels like that has shifted. Is anybody on the panel investing more in live stream shopping, or has a story of that it's bigger than anyone may think it is? Maybe I'll put it that way to see if we can. Is it worth talking about? All right, I'll take
it's worth addressing. Yeah, I was going to say it's worth. We did some experimentation. We believe live stream cooking shows might have some really interesting bite to them, unlike maybe some other more QVC like products. And so we've done some testing in there, and we are lucky enough to have full production kitchens here at headquarters. And I think our belief is that putting more content out there than not is often a good thing to continue to experiment. Whether we can get transactions from that is to be seen. I think it's a little less kind of transaction focused than many would have assumed a year ago.
All right. Well, thank you all, Saskia, Carter, Katie, Vivek. I learned a lot today. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I thought the audience polling questions were really interesting. So a lot of interest in TikTok. This is complex. You got to think about the marriage between marketing and technology to make this work. But I think there's a lot of high expectations for this moving into the future. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. And we will see you again on October 26th for our conversation about not being at the mercy of code freezes. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks.